This is a great time to remind you, subscribe to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com right now. It's $29.99 for 6 months of access, and you get premium content. And this is the stuff that people come for. This is the stuff of, hey, these are the names you need to know. This is the insider information. So Fitz, I'm not going to ask you to tell everybody on the who's on the big board and where and all that ranking, but I thought it was a really awesome, fascinating update that came out on Friday. You should go check it out after you sign up after the show. But what are some nuggets that you pulled from that you want to talk about here on the show? Any insights into maybe positions or things to look for this summer as we head into official visit season?
So I put this together over the last couple of weeks because you kind of like filter information and guy goes up, guy goes down, whatever. We settled on 20 guys. Half of them are defensive linemen. Like that's kind of where Penn State's at in this class. You've got some major not major holes. Yeah, okay, we'll call them major holes. The defensive line, both spots on the defensive line, maybe more so defensive tackle than defensive end, but there's still some good defensive ends on the board. Defensive tackle, wide receiver, obviously is one. Wide receiver, very interesting because there's actually not too many guys on the big board. A couple of guys that are outside looking in, like right off the big board, but it'll be interesting to see how Hagen's kind of moves and shakes with his board. And then safety is probably one we're not talking about just because Anthony Poindexter has done such an amazing job of developing that room. And you just kind of assume it's going to happen at some point. And there's some good ones on there. We're going to see some guys coming in from out of the region as well. So those are kind of the four spots that I'm looking to. And if you look at the board, there are some positions where Penn State's in a good spot with numbers and things like that. They got two linebackers. They'd like to add a third, but I could see it being a situation where they would add a fourth if it's the right guy. Kind of trying to figure out if Jamonte Waller is a linebacker as a defensive end, or if just he's whatever you want him or whatever he wants to be, which is what I would label him as. So you've got that, but you're also in with Elijah Newby. You're in with Waller, with Chris Cole, who Ryan talked to last week at the Under Armour camp. So there's just a lot of guys. Then sometimes I don't want to say fill up a position. Sometimes you take some guys early, and then there's still some really good guys out there. So you have to move, fluctuate, and find some plus ones. I know Jameer Grimsley, the cornerback from Tampa, is going to be a guy that Penn State pursues to the end. They've got 3 cornerbacks in the class, but you kind of stretch and go from there. So that's where I'm looking at for this big board. Is it's there's still a lot of talent out there. We're not even in official visit season. It seems like we're in that area where there hasn't. Now this is kind of outside of Grunkmeyer, but there hasn't been too much action lately. It's because those guys are ramping up to take officials, so people sort of get antsy about where things stand and why things aren't happening and things like that. But you got to wait till June to get those guys on campus. So setting up very nicely for a very busy summer for Ryan. I'm probably going to take it off again like I did last year. It'd be great. I haven't told you that yet, but
to me,
it's going to be it's going to be a fun time to follow Penn State recruiting because there is momentum there. And when they get those guys on campus, we've seen how well we've seen. I'm just getting excited thinking about it. We've seen how well they do when they get these guys face to face, and I think that's going to continue this summer.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point about how that we're not even into the main commitment season. I know spring is there's the first wave, and then the second wave hasn't even come yet, and they're at 14 recruits at this point, so they're in a good position. But there are big holes, you mentioned. Defensive tackle makes up a huge part of the big board. So Ryan, I've said I feel like from the offensive tackle position before they were able to get some of the guys they did, still maybe 1 or 2 guys they could add to that class. I feel like they're in a really good position because the guys that they have interest with, and it seems like they have some good movement with. These are all really good prospects where they're going to get a good class because there are enough names that even if you miss on 1 or 2, they're going to have a really good class. I feel the same way about quarterback. Like if they decide to add another one, Ethan Grunkmeyer is excellent, as we've seen. If they add another guy, that's a really talented class of high floor players. Is there a position in this group of uncommitted sections of this class that you feel similarly, where you feel like there's enough names and enough good relationships where Penn State is going to land those guys? It's just it hasn't happened yet because they're going after guys that want to take official visits.
Good question. Safety. I between DeJuan Lane doesn't have any other official visit set, and he's absolutely a priority. Kosh Sanders has always been pretty high on Penn State. Fabu Torre's always been pretty high on Penn State. Like they should fall. And a lot of these guys have been pretty open and honest the whole time about hey, just get me to my official visits. I mean, that's one consistent theme with pretty much, I don't want to say DeJuan because DeJuan doesn't really talk to us a whole lot, but at least with Torrey and Sanders, I'm missing somebody too. I know there's another, Jalen McClain potentially. We'll see what happens there. But I feel pretty good that they'll be fine with safety. And again, corner was always more important than safety in this class as well. I mean, I could see two safeties because of the talent they have left, but it's certainly a year where they need to stack up on corner more. I want to say defensive line, but I think like they're in a good position with quite a few guys. But I think what fans want to see is Benedict Ume quality guys.
Yes.
And a lot of them are more those high 3-star kind of guys. Again, I mean, if you just look at defensive tackle, I did this a couple of weeks ago. We were doing a chat, and just go look at defensive tackle, out of the top 10, 15 defensive tackles over the last 3-4 classes, it's always like 60, 70, 80% of them are all from down south, just out of Penn State's region. And this has been a consistent theme. That's why a guy like landing Benedict Ume is so important this year. That's why landing, who's the kid who went to Ohio State last year from DeMatha, Sean?
Jason Moore.
Yes, Jason Moore was such a big miss last year because you only get those big time, top 150 kind of guys in this region so often. There's a lot of low 4-star, high 3-star guys. But again, I think fans are looking for, the next Jared Odrick, kind of player to come up through here. So go ahead,
Ryan, quick trivia question. This is the unscientific method here, but industry rankings, defensive linemen, how many of the top 15 do you think are committed somewhere?
I have no idea. I'd say half to half.
It is one.
Off?
Jeremiah Beeman committed to Alabama yesterday. So wow. This is a position, because they are so in demand that schools are offering. It's going to be a big money position if you're talking NIL. It's going to be a position, I think, where guys take longer because they're going to wait for their officials. Schools are going to try and woo them and keep them interested long enough. And we've talked about this before. Even guys that are on the lower end, like, you're big and you can move, you're going to be in demand. So that's a position that has not a ton of guys have come off the board. Now, Penn State's in on just a couple of those guys in the top 15. Benedict Ume, as you mentioned, but Nigel Smith, who's coming up for an official visit. T.A. Cunningham, who was not on campus this week, and he just tweeted that picture. But you got guys like that are kind of, waiting around to figure out what the best type of fit would be for them. We'll go fit, we'll go package, whatever you want to say, whatever that comes together. So you look at positions like that. Offensive line usually commits a little bit early. Those guys don't feel the need. I mean, we talked to Egan Boyer, like if he had to go another month with being uncommitted, he would have you would have gone insane. Tight ends are usually off the board pretty early. Running back, it's kind of hit and miss. A couple of cycles ago, Penn State didn't have any running backs going into officials. Last year, I believe it was Singleton. Yeah, so you've got a kind of a mix there. But there are some positions that just take a little bit longer. Defensive line is one of those because they're going to be in demand, and it's in the age of NIL. These guys are out there figuring out what the fit is, and I think that's something it's worth taking into account. Wide receiver, again, is kind of like running back, is kind of a mix. Some guys commit early, other guys open it up and wait to see. But there's so many receivers out there. I mean, it's a dime a dozen position, and that's no disrespect to anybody that they're recruiting, but a lot of these guys are similar prospects. So I think if you just look position by position, some of these traditionally wait. Remember that big run that Penn State went on in the class of 2022. You waited for Zane Durant, Caleb Artis, Denai Dennis Sutton, all those defensive linemen committed in July of that year, basically. And that's kind of, I don't know if I see that playing out exactly like that, but Penn State would actually really like for that to be the case.